They say when you're running from something, the last place you end up is usually where you are meant to be. If that's true, I wish I had never come here. I moved into the Maplewood apartments in the middle of October. It was the cheapest listing I could find on short notice. No credit checks, no questions asked. I needed out of my old life fast, and this place felt like a decent enough hiding spot. The building was old. The kind of old where the hallway lights flickered every few seconds and the air smelled faintly like wet drywall and old books. I figured I could live with it. My unit was 3A, on the top floor. Right across from me was 3B. The door was always shut. No sound ever came from it. No mail, no packages, no signs of life. Just a metal door with peeling paint, a broken doorbell, and a peephole that always felt like it was staring back. When I asked the landlord about it, he just shrugged. "Been there a long time," he said. "Don't bother him." The first few nights were uneventful, quiet, even peaceful. But then the noises started. It was always around 2 or 3 in the morning. At first, it was just light footsteps outside my door. Slow and shuffling, like someone pacing the hallway. I assumed it was one of the other tenants. Thin walls, old buildings, you hear things. But one night, I got curious and opened my door. The hallway was completely empty. No sound, no movement. Just the faint buzzing of the ceiling light and that same mildew smell. Then came the whispers. Low, breathy murmurs just beyond the wall that separated my unit from 3B. I couldn't make out any words, just a steady, broken rhythm, like someone muttering through clenched teeth. And the peephole. That's when things really got weird. It always looked dark, not just shadowed, but black, like someone was standing behind it, watching, waiting. A few times I tried knocking, lightly, just to be polite. I even left a note, thinking maybe the guy was just shy or reclusive. Nothing. No reply. No sound. But every time I left my apartment after that, I swear I could hear the floorboards behind me creak like someone stepping back from the door of 3B. I started having nightmares. Every night, the same dream. Me standing in front of the door to 3B, unable to move, unable to speak, as something scratched from the other side. It got to the point where I avoided my own hallway. I'd rush out with headphones in, eyes forward, pretending everything was fine. But I couldn't shake the feeling, like I was always being watched. Not just from the peephole anymore, from behind my walls, from beneath my bed, even inside the mirror. After 2 weeks of this, I snapped. I went down to the manager's office and asked, half joking, what was up with the guy in 3B? The manager looked at me like I'd lost my mind. 3B's been empty for almost 5 years, he said flatly. Last tenant, well, it wasn't good. He hesitated before continuing. He was an older guy, lived alone, quiet. One day, the neighbors complained about the smell. Police found him dead inside. Heart attack, they said. But the weird part? He was sitting against the door like he was trying to crawl out. I asked about security footage. The manager shrugged. Nothing recorded past midnight. Cameras glitch on the 3rd floor. They always have. That night, I stood in the hallway, staring at 3B. The door was different. A new scratch I hadn't noticed before right where the peephole was. And this time, I could feel it. Someone was on the other side, not watching, waiting. That night, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even pretend anymore. I just sat there on my couch, all the lights on, staring at my door, at the door across the hall. Around 2:47 a.m., it started again. The footsteps. The soft, dragging sound like bare feet on old wood. I stood and crept toward my door, pressing my eye to the peephole. Dark. And then movement. Not from the hall, no. From inside the peephole. A glimmer, like an eye looking back. I stumbled backward as a loud knock shattered the silence. Not on my door. On 3B. Without thinking, I opened mine. 3B's door was cracked open. Just a few inches. Enough to see that the inside was pitch black, but not empty. Someone, something, was there. A shape, human, still, facing the door. I should have run, but instead, I stepped forward, and the second my foot hit that threshold, everything changed. I was in his apartment, but not now. I saw flashes. A man, sitting alone in the dark, muttering to himself. Whispers surrounding him. Something unseen moving in the shadows. He was terrified, clawing at the door, trying to leave. And then he saw me. Not the man. The thing inside him. It lunged. I screamed and fell backward, back into my own hallway. The door to 3B slammed shut behind me. It's been quiet ever since, but every night the peephole is still dark. And now, I think it's my door someone's watching through. I moved out 2 days later, packed everything I owned in the middle of the night, and never looked back. The manager didn't ask why. Maybe he already knew. Maybe he'd heard it before. For a while, I tried to convince myself it was just stress, sleep deprivation, isolation, a bad case of paranoia. But the memory of that thing staring at me from the dark, that's not something I imagined. I know what I saw. Sometimes I wonder if the man in 3B ever left, or if whatever had him is still there, waiting for someone else to come close enough. Last week, out of curiosity, I checked the building's rental listings. 3B was posted as available. Newly renovated. No mention of its history. And tonight, I got an email from a stranger. No subject, no message, just one sentence. Hey, do you ever hear footsteps outside your door around 3 a.m.? I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because no, it's not my story anymore. It's theirs. I always thought moving into a quiet neighborhood would finally bring me peace. Instead, it brought me something else entirely, something I still can't explain. It started 2 weeks ago when I left behind the noise and chaos of city life and moved into a modest 2-bedroom house on the edge of town. It sat nestled between tall pines, where the only sounds were rustling leaves and the distant hum of cicadas. The neighbors waved politely, but never stopped to talk, except for the one next door. He never came out, not once. There was something off about that house. The windows were always closed, the blinds always drawn. The air around it felt colder somehow, even on warm days. Every time I stepped outside, I could feel eyes on me, like I was being watched from somewhere just out of sight. At first, I told myself it was just the new environment playing tricks on me. But then, late at night, I started hearing it. Faint, scraping noises coming from the backyard. Not animals, not wind. Something deliberate. Something human. I first saw him the day after I moved in. A tall, pale man in his late 50s, wearing a filthy flannel shirt and old work boots. He stood in his backyard, perfectly still, just staring at the ground. No gardening tools, no movement, just standing there like a statue for what felt like 10 minutes straight. I waved, trying to be friendly. He didn't wave back. He just turned and walked inside without a word. From then on, I noticed odd things. He never left the house during the day, but at night, around 2 or 3 a.m., I'd hear the soft creak of his back gate, followed by the unmistakable sound of a shovel cutting into dirt. When I peeked through my blinds, I saw him digging under the dim light of a single hanging bulb on his porch, always in the same corner of his yard. He never seemed to bury anything or dig anything up. Just digging. One night, he stopped mid-dig, slowly turned, and looked straight at my window. I ducked instantly, heart pounding. When I looked again, he was gone. But the shovel was still standing upright in the earth, like he'd vanished into the ground. It didn't take long before things started to get weird. First, it was the noises. Scratching, light at first, coming from the shared fence between our yards. Then knocks on my back door around midnight. Not loud, just a single thud, like someone testing if I was awake. Then I noticed my garden gate was open one morning. I never leave it open. A few tools were missing from the shed, nothing valuable, but definitely not misplaced. One night, I swear I heard footsteps on my porch. When I checked the security cam footage, it was corrupted, just static. I kept telling myself there had to be a rational explanation. Wind, raccoons, maybe some neighborhood kid messing around. But then I found muddy footprints on my back patio, bare feet. Long, narrow, and smeared, like someone had been dragging them. The final straw was my dog, Benny. Sweetest little guy. He refused to go outside at night. He'd growl low at the fence, ears pinned back, tail between his legs. One night he barked so loud I ran outside, only to find fresh dirt piled on the neighbor's side of the fence and what looked like the corner of a plastic garbage bag poking through. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The noises, the footprints, the plastic bag in the dirt, it all screamed that something was wrong. I told myself I just needed answers, maybe even to clear my own paranoia. So one afternoon, while the neighbor's house looked dark and silent, I decided to take a closer look. I climbed onto an old crate by the fence and peeked over into his yard. The digging spot was obvious, dirt uneven, and turned over like it had been worked again and again. But what caught my eye was the smell. Even from where I stood, a faint, rotting stench clung to the air like damp cloth. That night, I grabbed a flashlight and snuck out around 1 a.m. I crept along the edge of my yard to where the fence had a missing slat. Through it, I spotted something glinting in the dirt, metal. I reached through and pulled it closer. It was a bracelet, a child's bracelet, pink with little plastic hearts, the kind you'd find in a dollar store. I felt sick. I didn't know if he had a kid. No one ever visited him. But why was it buried in that yard? I started documenting everything from that moment on. The next day, I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. I walked over, hands shaking, and knocked on his front door. At first, nothing, just silence. Then, the door creaked open, slow, like it hadn't been used in years, and there he stood. Same flannel shirt, stained and wrinkled. Same dead eyes. "I think we need to talk," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "About the digging, the noises, and the bracelet I found." For a long second, he just stared at me. Then he smiled. But it wasn't comforting. It was the kind of smile you give when you know something the other person doesn't. He leaned in slightly and said, "You should stay out of things that don't concern you." I took a step back. "What's buried in your yard?" He tilted his head. "You think you know what's buried? But the real question is, who?" I couldn't breathe. Then he slammed the door in my face, hard enough that the whole porch shook. I reported everything to the police that night. They came, took a quick look, and said there wasn't enough to go on. And just like that, he was still next door, watching, waiting. I couldn't sleep. Not after that confrontation. Not with him just on the other side of the wall. Something inside me snapped. I needed to know the truth. I waited until after midnight, when the street was silent and his house was completely dark. Armed with gloves, a flashlight, and every ounce of courage I had left, I slipped into his yard through the broken slat in the fence. I headed straight for the spot he always dug. The dirt was soft, too soft. My hands trembled as I dug, pulling back layer after layer of cold earth. Then, I hit something. Plastic. I froze. It was a black trash bag, heavy, wet. I peeled it open just enough to see what was inside, and nearly dropped the flashlight. A small shoe, pink, caked in dried mud, and beneath it, the unmistakable shape of a tiny, pale arm. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. That bracelet I found, it belonged to her. I ran back to my house and called the police. Again, this time, they couldn't ignore it. They came with dogs, diggers, and stretchers. In total, they found the remains of 3 children. All of them buried next door. They arrested him that night, calm, emotionless, like he'd been expecting it. He didn't say a word as they led him away in handcuffs. The news called him a suspected serial killer, but no one really knew who he was. No family, no records, just a house full of silence and dirt. I moved out a week later. I couldn't stay, not with that yard still visible from my bedroom window. But sometimes I wonder, how many others are out there? Digging, watching, hiding behind locked doors. And worst of all, what if he wasn't working alone? They say every neighborhood has that one house, the one nobody talks about but everyone watches. For me, it was the house right next door. I had just moved into a quiet suburban street a few weeks ago. Fresh paint on the walls, a wide lawn, and neighbors who waved as I passed. It was the kind of place people dream about settling into. Everything felt perfect, almost too perfect, except for the house beside mine. It was identical in structure to the others, but looked off. The lawn was neatly trimmed, and the porch light worked, but no one ever came or went. No deliveries, no cars, no voices. Just silence. At first, I assumed it was vacant. Then, one night, I saw a light flicker in the upstairs bedroom. Not just flicker, pulse. Like someone turning it on and off over and over. I watched from my window, eyes straining through the darkness, heart in my throat. Then it stopped. Another night I swore I saw a silhouette in the window. Tall, still, just standing there. But when I blinked, it was gone. The neighbors? They just said, "That house has been empty for years." But it didn't feel empty, not even a little. It started with the footsteps. Late at night, when the world outside had gone quiet, I'd hear them, slow, deliberate steps coming from next door. Not the creaks of an old house settling, but distinct thuds across wooden floors. At first, I thought maybe someone had moved in without telling anyone, but every time I checked, the house was dark, lifeless, still. One evening, I saw movement through the window, just a flash, like someone had darted across the hallway upstairs. I stared for a solid minute, waiting, but nothing else happened. I mentioned it to Mrs. Langley across the street the next morning. She gave me a tight smile and said, "You're probably just hearing raccoons on the roof or something. That place hasn't had a tenant in over a decade." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then came the night that still chills me. I was brushing my teeth, the bathroom window giving me a clear view of the house's upper floor. That's when I saw it. A figure in the window. It stood still, face obscured in shadow, just watching. I froze, toothbrush hanging from my mouth, foam dripping down my chin. I couldn't move. Then, as if it knew I was looking, the figure stepped back and disappeared into the dark. The light never turned on. No curtain moved. Just gone. And I knew, in that moment, I wasn't imagining a damn thing. Curiosity got the best of me one Saturday afternoon. The sun was out, the air was crisp, and I figured if something was really going on, I could prove it to myself in daylight. The side gate to the house was rusted but unlocked. My heart thudded as I walked around to the back door. It creaked open with the kind of groan that makes your skin crawl. The air inside was stale, heavy with dust and something else, something sour. The living room was still furnished, like someone had left in a hurry years ago. A floral couch faded from sunlight, faced an old television. Picture frames sat on the mantel, family photos, smiling faces I didn't recognize. Coats hung neatly by the door. A child's backpack leaned against the wall. It felt like the house had been paused, frozen in time. I moved slowly, careful not to breathe too deep or make too much noise. Upstairs, the feeling worsened. Cold air brushed my arms, even though the windows were shut. One of the bedrooms looked like a little girl's room, pink wallpaper peeling at the corners, stuffed animals neatly lined along the bed. But the mattress was slashed open, the stuffing pulled out like something had clawed its way in or out. In the master bedroom, I found it. A diary. It was worn, the pages yellowed and curling. The last entries were frantic, mentions of voices in the walls, of someone or something walking the halls at night. One sentence was underlined 3 times. It doesn't want us to leave. I slammed the book shut. Every hair on my body stood on end. That house wasn't empty. It was waiting. It was a little after midnight when everything exploded into chaos. I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, when I heard it, a slam, like a door being thrown shut with full force, then another and another. I shot upright, heart pounding. The sounds were coming from the house next door. Only this time, they weren't muffled like before. They were close, almost like the walls between us had vanished. Then, the lights in my house began to flicker. First the hallway, then the bathroom, then the kitchen. One by one, they turned off and on, like someone was walking through, flipping switches. I grabbed my phone, but the screen stayed black, unresponsive. No signal, no light. The air turned icy. I don't even remember deciding to go next door. I just did. Something inside me said it had to stop, that if I didn't face it now, it would come for me anyway. I walked into the empty house with nothing but a flashlight. The second I crossed the threshold, the door slammed behind me. The living room was pitch black, but then something moved, slowly, deliberately, from the corner. A figure, pale, thin, its limbs too long, its face blank, no eyes, no mouth, just smooth, gray skin. It stood there, staring, or at least I felt it staring. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't scream. I backed up, feet dragging, every inch of my body screaming to run, but I couldn't move fast enough. Then it stepped toward me. That was enough. I turned and bolted, crashing through the door, tripping on the porch steps, crawling till I could stand. I didn't stop running until I was back in my own home, slamming the door shut behind me. I locked every window, every door, but I still felt it, watching. The next morning, I went straight to the police. I told them everything, the lights, the noises, the figure in the house. I even brought the diary I'd found. They humored me, nodded politely, and agreed to do a welfare check on the property. I waited outside while 2 officers went in. 10 minutes later, they came out and told me the house was completely empty. No diary, no signs of anyone ever being there. Nothing. They said the place had been abandoned for years, that what I saw was probably a squatter or maybe just stress playing tricks on me. I tried to argue, but their tone made it clear the conversation was over. A few weeks later, a construction crew showed up. Some new developer had bought the property and planned to tear the house down. I watched as they brought in heavy machinery, knocking down walls and ripping apart the roof. But that's when things got worse. 2 workers quit on the first day. One refused to come back, saying he heard whispering in the attic even though there was no floor up there anymore. Another fell from the scaffolding and broke his leg. He claimed something pushed him. Now, the lot just sits there, half demolished, half forgotten. No one works on it, no one talks about it. But I still hear the footsteps some nights. Still feel that cold air drift through my bedroom window. So if you ever move into a nice little neighborhood and there's one house that feels a little too quiet, don't ignore it. Sometimes a house isn't empty. It's just waiting.